welcome to Digi Tea Time
with Izzy and Mimi,
where we'll be discussing our unsolicited opinions on books, TV shows, films, and anything in between.
On this episode, we're going to be discussing The Night We Met by Abby Jimenez. A quick summary of the book. The story is a missed opportunity trope with dual POVs from the main characters, Larissa and Chris. Larissa and Chris meet one night at a concert while with friends. Larissa needs a ride home after the concert and has to choose between Chris and his best friend Jake.
Johnny? Who the is Johnny?
Just quick note, for some reason we forgot Mike's name and began calling him Jake the whole time. Please ignore that.
She accepts a ride from Jake because she felt that Chris was not interested. Flash forward months later, Larissa is dating Jake, who is supposed to give her and her mother a ride to the hospital for a scheduled surgery.
Jake fails to show up and sends Chris in his place instead. This leads to Larissa and Chris getting to know each other more and hitting it off. They find a dog, which they decide to co-parent, which leads to them spending a lot more time together. Chris starts to develop strong feelings for Larissa, which is a problem since she is still dating his best friend Jake. Things become messy, and Larissa and Chris have to come to terms with their feelings for each other, all while trying not to hurt anyone in the process.
All right, so Iz, what are your thoughts about this book?
Honestly, I was a bit disappointed with this book. Being a fan of Abby Jimenez's writing, I love the way she's able to write a romance story that includes things like trauma, mental health issues, and toxic family dynamics. All these things that make characters feel more real and more human. This book just wasn't for me. I feel like this book, instead of making me connect to the characters, it was telling me that I cared about the characters, and this is why I cared about them, especially because they were making decisions that I felt a person of their age would not make.
I think I was probably about 30% away of the book when I wanted to DNF it, but I stuck it out because I was hoping it would get better. Starting at the beginning, the co-parenting of the dog, because I just thought it was weird to co-parent a dog with a guy that you hardly even know, let alone your boyfriend's best friend. It was just kind of a weird decision. I think what would have been a better way to handle the dog situation was maybe Chris already had the dog, like it belonged to his mom, and spoiler alert if you weren't already warned, his mom had recently passed away, so the dog had to stay in his care, and he didn't want to get rid of the dog because he was still, adapting to losing his mother, so he didn't want to get rid of the dog, but he doesn't have the time for it. So I think it would have been a good idea at that point to be like, oh, I met Larissa and she does all these odd jobs. She dog walks and dog sits. And that way they can have a lot of time spending together, and especially if she goes to love the dog too. So that keeps them in communication as opposed to just be like, oh, we just met and we just found this random dog. Now we're going to co-parent it. You feel more of that pain and loss about his mother. So it does bring that connection more.
Yeah, that definitely makes way more sense. And it already made me connect to your version of Chris.
Another thing that bothered me was the convenience of all the situations they were put in. Every time they were meeting up in a group with other people in other settings, something always happened and the rest of the people didn't show up. And it was just, oh my God, it's just them two alone now. Now they have to spend all these hours together. Nobody batted an eye of all the alone time they were spending together.
They had Jake the whole time just throwing Larissa at Chris. Hey, go hang out with him. Hey, he's going to give you a ride. Hey, he can do this. Hey, he'll take you here.
Exactly. Another point of the convenience of everything.
It felt very unrealistic. So that brings us over to the issue of Jake's flakiness. Jake was a red flag from the start. At first date, the having to take her mom and her to the hospital, he flaked out and didn't even bother to say, hey, I'm sending someone so you still have a ride. To me, immediate red flag. Like, you just started dating this guy. He begged you for weeks to go out with him. And then this is one of the first things he does. Girl, why did you continue dating him?
My issues lie more with how they were trying to make Jake out to be the villain, where honestly, I felt bad for him majority of the book.
I wanted to know more about Jake and what his situation was. I wanted to see why he was an alcoholic. I feel like the real story was there. The overall story would have hit harder if they would have given us some of Jake's POV. It would have been able to make a connection and see how all three people were feeling and how everything that was happening was affecting them.
Yeah, but that would make you definitely not root for Chris and Larissa if you had a Jake POV.
True. We're supposed to hate Jake here. It's giving Jeremiah Summer Turned Pretty. So now let's get into Chris. His obsession with Larissa's allergy. I just assumed, oh, it has to do something with his trauma. That's why he's so fixated on this. I was waiting for his trauma to be the way his mom's death happened. It could be one thing to be like, oh, yeah, well, he was concerned. She's a grown adult, and obviously she's been doing this with her whole life. She doesn't need this man to all of a sudden come into her life and start protecting her. It was really weird. To me, it just felt like he was infantilizing her.
That would have actually been a good way to connect it. His mom probably had allergic reactions, or her death had to do something with an allergy.
With an expired EpiPen or something.
I can see where that would be, an attractive quality in a man. Like, oh, this man, even though he just met you, he's really concerned about you. But you're right. It did cross over a line where it was too overprotective, especially for someone who they had just met, which leads into how I felt that he was a little bit creepy and obsessive over her. As far as the snow-covered car, I can see where it's a romantic gesture that a guy is thinking about you and he doesn't want you to work hard and clean up the snow off your car. So I think it would have been a sweet thing if he did it without thinking. But the fact that he was just marinating in it and like working himself up. I just pictured him pacing back and forth in his room, getting angry at Jake for something that he was not aware of, because poor guy is dealing with alcoholism. I mean, that guy is struggling. He's dealing with his own illness and struggling over there, and nobody knows. That part was where it felt creepy and obsessive, as opposed to he just thought, oh man, she's going to have to take off in the snow at 4 a.m. and it's dark and cold. And he just took off and did it without thinking. And then he's just like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that.
That brings me to an issue that I had is they really try to romanticize everything that Chris was doing. And then over here on the other side, they're demonizing Jake for his addiction. Instead of just showing how the struggles of being an alcoholic or just having an addiction of some sort, how that can strain a relationship between two people, it just felt like they were demonizing him for having an addiction, showing us like, look, this is why he's a bad guy. This is why we're not rooting for him. And this is why we're rooting for Chris, because he's a good guy. He lost his mom. So he has trauma from losing his mom. So he's protective of Larissa because he's trying to protect her, because he doesn't want to lose her, because he cares about her. So on one hand, we're supposed to romanticize Chris for his flaws, but Jake, on the other hand, was made out to be a villain. That to me felt very icky.
I know. I felt really bad for him throughout the whole book. And I think that's why I also didn't vibe with Chris and Larissa.
I feel the whole entire time they were too focused on themselves and their own feelings that they did not notice that he was struggling with alcohol, even though they were watching him drink.
Especially if Jake's mother, the trauma was that she was an alcoholic. I mean, you think he would have noticed the signs.
Exactly. My main reason why I read this was because I love a good yearn. I love slow burns, and yearning is my thing when it comes to books. However, this was not what I was promised. I was told this would be yearning. This was not.
So that's what bothered me at the end. Chris and Larissa do all these things, and they end up burning all the bridges with Chris's friends. The whole cabin scene, things blow up, and then they move in together right away. And she leaves Jake, and then Chris goes, but we're not going to be together. We have these feelings we're acknowledging that we have these feelings for each other, that we're both into each other, and now you're single and you're living with me, but we're not going to be together. We burned all our bridges, but we're not going to cross that part.
Yeah, at that point, it did not make sense. All of a sudden, now you have willpower to stop yourself when you were crossing lots of boundaries before. To me, it's like, at least now she, has ended things with Jake. I get waiting some time and taking things slow, but by this point, now you feel like you got to put boundaries. Didn't really make sense.
I'm glad that the book didn't end with Jake being fully on board of the relationship in the end. He obviously was not comfortable with it, but he wasn't going to be because he understood that he did many wrong things in the relationship. That was probably one of the only scenes that I liked, was at the end when Jake and Chris were talking at the end.
And honestly, I feel more invested in whether we get a book with Jake because I want to know Jake's story. To me, at the end of the book, I only felt like I connected to Jake. He was very flawed. They all had their flaws, but I feel like he was the only one that had some kind of character growth. He grew a lot and he was making a lot of positive changes. He's the only one that I ended up caring about. And I don't think that's what this book was supposed to be. Just want to emphasize that we are not excusing Jake's behavior, regardless whether he was under the influence or not. The fact that he forced himself on Larissa, it was an unconsensual kiss. That is not okay, and we are not defending that in any way. All our arguments that we're making in defense of Mike are due to everything that happened before this. So pretty much the entire book is where everything was sitting wrong with us, where yes, he was making mistakes, but not in a way where he was a bad guy. It was just due to his illness that he's struggling with. We do not condone this. Just want to be very clear on this.
What was your overall rating of this book?
My overall rating, I feel like I'm being generous, is 2.5 for me because I didn't really like the story at all.
Yeah, I gave it about a 2 of a rating out of 5. It had the bones. It had the story could have been there, it was almost there, but there was just so many things I think could have been done differently to make the story flow better. Again, mostly what bothered me was the convenience of all the situations that they were put in and how it felt like it was rushed.
Did feel like a rushed story. It felt like not as much time went into this one compared to Just for the Summer. That is still my top Abby Jimenez book. As of right now, I felt like that book was just so good. I compare all her books to that one.
Yeah, that was a really good book.
Okay, so thank you for joining us with our unsolicited opinions, which no one asked.
And nobody cares.
But some might relate.
And if you relate, drop down a comment. Let us know what you think. Do you agree with us? Do you hate everything we just said?
And honestly, if you completely disagree with everything we say, just let us know how you felt about it. I do like seeing different perspectives. Maybe there's something we missed that you guys saw that we didn't. Even if you completely disagree and hate everything we said, just keep it respectful, please. Thank you so much for joining us for this one. We'll be back with our next one.
Thank you for listening.